Hello and welcome to Words of the Wild, a podcast brought to you by the Scottish Wildlife Trust. My name is Ed and I will be your host for this episode. As always, I am joined by my wonderful colleague and co-host.
Hello everyone, I'm Rachel and yeah, it's great to be back for another natter. So today we are going to be looking and speaking to some of our trust staff and volunteers. Because at the Trust, we have such a brilliant collection of staff, volunteers, members, supporters, and it's really everyone's passion and motivation that gives the Trust, its strong foundation so that we can deliver our, fantastic goals and targets. So to get us started, where are we off to, Ed?
Well, our first feature for this episode is going to be with our local groups. So we heard from the Fife Kinross Local Group. We caught up with Andy over at Morton Lochs for an introduction to birdwatching event. So I'm not gonna chat too much. So without further ado, here is Andy.
Hi, I'm Andy Cage. I'm the chair of the Fife Kinross Local Group. I'm not an expert in any field, but I am an enthusiastic amateur in anything to do with wildlife, particularly birds and moths.
So for those of our listeners who aren't quite familiar with the Scottish Wildlife Trust's local groups, can you tell us a little bit about what they're about?
Yeah, the purpose of the local groups is to enable like-minded people who care about nature and are passionate about wildlife to get together in their local area and learn about wildlife, to share ideas, and we do a range of things by arranging local meetings, indoor meetings with guest speakers, and outdoor trips like the one we're doing today at Morton Lochs. And we also keep an eye on planning issues as well locally so that we can react to any planned developments that might have an impact on wildlife, either by objecting where necessary or by talking to the planners about ways in which we can mitigate the damage that might be caused.
Great, and you're the chair of the Fife and Kinross Local Group, so what does that role entail?
Yeah, we've got a large 12-person committee in Fife, people from a range of backgrounds and wildlife experience, some professionals, some just enthusiastic amateurs like myself. And my role is to chair the committee meetings, which we hold every 2 months, and the annual general meeting. I also have to ensure that we work within the aims of the Trust and ensure that all the things that we do are safe. So I'll be responsible for collecting risk assessments for all our events as well.
And so the Fife and Kinross Local Group covers obviously quite a wide and large diverse area. So what are kind of some of the key habitats that we find here and that you kind of run these events on?
Fife's a big area. Fife and Kinross together go halfway across the country. To the north we've got the estuary of the Tay, and to the south the Forth estuary. Between we've got the dune habitats of Tentsmuir Point, running down to some premier migration points for birds such as Faichnie and the Isle of May. Inland, a lot of prime agricultural land, but there are still scattered areas of native woodland. We've got some coniferous forest like here at Tentsmuir where we are today. We've also got some areas of freshwater, so some large areas like Cameron Reservoir and Loch Leven, which are again prime areas for wildlife in the winter. To the west we have the hill areas of the Cleash Hills and the Lomond Hills, and we get a range of upland species there with even a few red grouse hanging on in the Lomonds.
So yeah, you mentioned today we're at Morton Lochs in Fife, which has been a fantastic walk round. We've been having a bit of a birding for beginners event. What are some of the other kind of activities and events that you do with the local group?
In the last few months we've had a range of outdoor events. We've had a walk along a disused railway line to see how nature can bound back when an area is abandoned over 50 years ago. We've had a bio-blitz at our reserve at Dumbarnie Links, and we've had a group tour to the Fleecefold Meadows Reserve, which is a prime meadow habitat. We've also had a number of walks along the Fife coastal route as well.
That sounds great. I mean, I had a great time today at the birding event. I feel like I've learnt a lot. I guess a wee extra bonus question. Do you have a sort of favourite kind of birding moment kind of within the kind of Fife and Kinross area that really stands out?
I spend a lot of my time on one particular patch, which is just a patch of farmland. There's very little water, there's a few wooded areas, but I spend a lot of my time birding in that area. And my prime birding events have always been where I've seen a new bird for that area. So I've been lucky with a number of species that I've seen there. Not going to name them all, but if I can recommend one thing to anybody, it's to get out there, find your own local patch and go regularly, and you'll be surprised what you can see.
Definitely. I think that's one of the things I was enjoying today is you see when you start to know species and kind of hear, you can recognise calls. I just feel so kind of immersed and connected, and I think I would love to kind of find that spot for myself where I continually go out, because I think you must just develop such a bond with the place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes absolute sense, and it's absolutely true. My own local patch and this patch at Morton Lochs, where I volunteer on a regular basis, are two areas that mean a huge amount to me. And it's a place you can come, you get peace of mind, it's good for mental health, it's good for physical health, the activity. You can just have a great time out in nature.
Yeah, definitely. And like you say, with, you're kind of recording as well as we go along on the kind of bird apps, you're also kind of contributing as well to the bigger kind of scientific picture, which is great.
Exactly. Another thing I would recommend is to record your findings either on iRecord or, for birds, probably the BTO's Bird Track app. They're very easy to use, and there's lots of help online if you're not sure how to start using them.
Brilliant. So can you tell us a little bit about the practical work that the group gets involved with supporting, with our local reserves team and such?
Yes, we work closely with Claire, our reserves manager. If she's got a job to do on one of the reserves and needs extra pairs of hands, I will coordinate a group of volunteers so that we can go and help them with that work. And that might involve clearing up after storms, it might be repairing fences and boardwalks, removing invasive non-native species of plants. Or we've had recently work parties out at Bankhead Moss, our peat bog reserve, removing birch where it's encroaching on the bog. We also have a flock of sheep that we use for grazing some of our meadow reserves. And again, we have to organise teams of volunteers to go and check those sheep every day to make sure that their well-being is met and that none have escaped.
Brilliant. Yeah, we heard from Laura, the shepherdess, in our last season of the podcast, and it was so interesting learning about the flying flock. It sounds really great. And I guess just kind of last thing, if someone was really kind of quite interested to get involved with the Fife and Kinross Local Group, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way to do that is to log into the Scottish Wildlife Trust website, click on groups, and that will tell you what groups are available. And there's information on there about how you can get involved with your local groups.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Andy. That was great. Thanks for chatting with us.
Pleasure. It's been a great morning.
A huge thank you to Andy there for recording with us. It's always great to hear from people who are out on the ground and our local groups who are doing some fantastic stuff. For those of our listeners who might not be aware, our local groups are at the heart of a lot of our activities, really. They really help to champion wildlife at a local level and carry out some really, really vital work throughout Scotland. Most of them are led by really passionate volunteers like Andy, who carry out a huge variety of activities, including practical conservation, advocacy work and fundraising. They also run events like the one that we've just heard from. They really, really inspire a lot of people. So a huge thank you to all of our local groups. If you'd like to find out more, do head over to our website and you can find your nearest local group. But Rachel, I really want to ask, because you went to the event and you recorded with Andy, what was it like? Because I've not been to Morton Lochs. It sounds like a really exciting event. So how was it?
I mean, yeah, I'd never been to Morton Lochs. It was absolutely gorgeous. Andy was running a bird watching for beginners session, and I really did fit in because I'm definitely a beginner when it comes to bird watching. Fantastic day. Andy is an absolute whiz. He could just ID birds that were they were just like a flying black dot to me. I could barely see them, and he knew exactly what it was. It was incredible, and it definitely gave me that kind of bird watching bug. So Andy, he kind of mentioned this when we were talking to him about kind of go out and visit your local patch. And Andy was talking about how, he goes out to his local patch and records the bird species that he sees through the British Trust of Ornithology app, the BTO app. And I've been hooked ever since. I've been really hooked on the Merlin Bird ID app, which is kind of, if you're into music, it's like Shazam, but for bird calls is what I like to say. So basically, the Merlin app helps you identify like bird calls and songs. You essentially just kind of have it running as you're out on a walk, and I genuinely can't go out for a walk without it now. It's amazing. And it can just tell you what the birds are singing. And that's like, for me, a really great way to feel connected to nature. I love when I know what I'm seeing or hearing. I was so inspired from the event with Andy. And like I say, the local groups do so many of these different kind of events. So definitely go and check them out. And don't be afraid if you're a beginner, because they were very welcoming and I learned a lot, definitely.
Yeah, I similarly, I really like Merlin. I think it's tons of fun. I had a really great conversation with Tracy a while ago when I was down in Cumbernauld, who we featured a couple of episodes ago, where we could hear a warbler. It was a grasshopper warbler, and we were both trying to get it on our Merlin app. It was almost like some sort of Pokemon Go kind of for birds experience. It was great, tons of fun. So definitely go and check Merlin out. But like Rachel said, do go and check out local groups. They do some fantastic stuff. So what is up next, Rachel?
We are going to join some Scottish Wildlife Trust volunteers, specifically Bobby and Colin, at the Killaloe Nature Reserve in Fife, which is near Dalgety Bay area. They were out busy cutting a wildflower meadow there. Definitely looked like a lot of hard work and noisy work as well. But it was fantastic to chat to Bobby and Colin.
Yeah, sure. We're at Killaloe. We're doing some habitat management and we're cutting the wildflower meadows. They get cut every year, then the cuttings get removed kind of thing. You can't have the meadows too nutrient rich or you won't get the wildflowers. So that's kind of an ongoing process over a lot of the sites. A lot of the time you'll get kind of people into like graze as well, so you get like sheep and cattle and all that. But today it's just all about the cutting. And I'm getting some much needed practice with the brush cutter. I'm Bobby Meakin, or Robert dependent, HND student at Oakridge College, SRUC, we shout out for Oakridge, and I'm a volunteer for the Scottish Wildlife Trust, and I recommend anybody that wants to do it. I've been volunteering with the Trust for around about a year and a half now, I'd say. Started in May 2024. It's been all go kind of since. It's been pretty good, I've enjoyed it, yeah. Originally, I'm actually at college for Wildlife and Conservation Management. I started that at the NC level. Of course, one of the things when you start, the lecturers kind of drill it into you is the importance of like networking. Everyone knows everybody in the industry kind of thing, and it's the best way to get in contact with people, kind of get some more practical skills and stuff, especially surveying. That was the main reason for that, and just I like to get out in nature a bit and I like to give back, and the Trust is a pretty good one for that, I'd say. Yeah, I'd recommend it to anyone. I'd say the variance with the reserves, again that's another reason why I really like Wildlife Trust. I believe it's 15 reserves across East and Central Scotland, so it's been good. I'd say being able to kind of see places that I wouldn't have been before, and then get to obviously do some work that I might not have been able to experience. Yeah. A lot of it is building on stuff that I've done in college, so it's quite good that way because you can come out, and if there's a modular that, like a big one was identification and classification of species. So the rangers, they're absolutely brilliant. If you just ask them anything, or they'll ask you the names of trees as you're walking along the reserves kind of thing, and I'd say that's been invaluable. That, and thankfully I got my brush cutter ticket, my certificate. That's really needed in this kind of industry, definitely. So I'd say I've learned quite a bit. I'd say probably my favourite was my second time out. We were doing some work along, I believe it was like Weaving kind of area, Ailey. And we finished a little bit early, and they actually took me around the coast a little bit, and we done bird identification and stuff. So that was really nice. It was really picturesque kind of thing. You had the cliffs to the right, the little golf course to the left, and then obviously the Forth in front. Yeah, that was again invaluable. That's it. The thing that I've found is you tend to remember things more if you can attach a memory to it, kind of thing. It's like, oh, so and so said this, or oh, that's when that happened, rather than just reading it in a book. I'd say that's my favourite. But again, there's many to choose from. I've not had a bad experience at all.
Good.
My name's Colin White. I've been a volunteer for 8 or so years. with Scottish Wildlife Trust. I retired when 60, and after a couple of years I felt the need to spend my time doing something constructive, and this has given me an opportunity to do that. Well, with all that time in the week, it's something to structure your time by, and I like the outdoors, and this has taken me to places where I would never have gone, not knowing where to go. We're here today in Killaloe, which is a reserve in the central Fife, really. I used to stay in Kirkcaldy, just down the road, and drove past this road many times and was totally unaware that there was this place here. We're here today to cut back grass from areas that we want to promote as meadows, wildlife meadows. So the removal of the grass and other plants makes it easier for the more delicate flowers to break through. So hopefully, in the years to come, we'll see more and more. You do see various orchids here, so it is making a mark. It is what it says. The name, is volunteering, and that's my favourite thing about volunteering. It's volunteering. You don't have to get out of your bed if it's pouring sleet and snow. It's purely, have a reason for not turning up. You don't have to turn up, but if you do, you're made very welcome. I've learned a few facts about birds and bees and things, and matters of construction and digging holes and filling them in again, and working with fences. So there's a lot of, the detail is there, but broadly speaking, it's something to do with my time. It pays back for whatever my sins, and I enjoy it. The things I enjoy most are the little surprises that turn up. There's a little island just in the Forth that we can wade across at low tide, and 8 times out of 10 your wellies don't get flooded in the crossing. So it's it's little there's all these little things around, and coming upon them and being part of it is very satisfying, I find.
So a huge thank you again to Bobby and Colin for chatting. I think they were quite glad of the break. Like you said, Rachel, it looked like a lot of hard work with those, all the machinery running, cutting the wildflower meadow back. But I had actually visited Killaloe a good few months ago when it was kind of a wildflower meadow. And the change was fantastic. They've obviously worked really hard to cut everything back, which feels like quite a dramatic change and quite a drastic step, but it's so important for a lot of those wildflower species. Cutting things down gives them the light and the space, and removing all the grass cuttings as well means that the nutrients don't go back into the ground. Contrary to what we think should be the case, a lot of wildflower species actually like quite nutrient low soil. So if we take the grass cuttings off, it makes sure that those nutrients don't go back into the ground, and the wildflowers can then come back through even better the next year. So it feels like, I say, it feels like a really dramatic step, but it's actually really, really important, and just means that you get more and more of those wildflower species and orchids and things coming through. So big change from when I was last there, but like I say, I think Bobby and Colin were glad of the break. It looked like quite hard work on a slope with the brush cutters.
Yeah, the slope, yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, it's fantastic the dedication our volunteers have across the trust, and going out with Bobby and Colin just let us see that kind of firsthand. It was a fantastic day.
Talking of people who are very dedicated, our last feature for this episode is our Day in the Life with John McTague. Now, John is the ecologist here at the Trust, and I always feel like ecologists are kind of the obvious role that people think of when we talk about conservation. So I really enjoyed chatting to John to get an insight into what he actually gets up to and what he does. John, thank you very much for chatting today. The first question is, could you tell us a bit about your role?
Yeah, so the Trust recognised that we've got an amazing network of nature reserves with some amazing habitats, but we don't really know much about what condition the habitats are in necessarily. And there's been a lot of push from council to basically learn a bit more about that. So the aim is to develop and undertake habitat condition assessments across key habitats on the Trust reserves, so whether that's blanket bog, raised bog, woodland, acid grassland, and then that can feed into management for these habitats, just so it's more evidence-based management rather than just doing things because that's how it's always been done, for example.
And as the Habitats Ecologist at the Trust, what does a typical day look like for you?
Well, I've only been in the post for just under a year, and it's a new post for the Trust. There wasn't a predecessor, so it's a bit of a varied one. In the spring and summer, I'm out on site quite a lot, undertaking survey work and assessment on reserves. Now it's the winter, I'm going to be very much desk-based for the next 6 months. Initially, the job involved developing methods for undertaking habitat condition assessment. We quickly realised that was very complicated, so we're trying to use existing methods where we can, like ones developed by Joint Nature Conservation Council that are used for designated sites, following sort of Nature Scott methods, also looking at what other organisations are doing, looking at what's being used in England for biodiversity net gain assessments, and then trying to get a sort of suitable method for all habitats that we can use across the Trust's reserves. We recognise that nature reserves on their own aren't a solution to the biodiversity crisis, but they're an important part of it, and they can act as reservoirs for biodiversity into the wider landscape. And we can only control our reserves, so we kind of need to know what's happening on them.
And as you've mentioned, you're out and about quite a lot. So have you had any memorable wildlife encounters while you're kind of on reserves?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. This year, I think probably one of the most memorable was seeing a red squirrel on a reserve where we didn't know they were there. So that was quite cool. And it's always exciting to see things like ospreys or badgers, but I think I've really enjoyed seeing things I'm not so familiar with. So when I was on a raised bog this summer, I saw a spiny shield bug, which I knew nothing about, took a photo of it, looked it up when I got home. And I kind of find things like that just as exciting as seeing the sort of big famous species, you know.
And I think a lot of people out there probably think of ecologists as a kind of obvious role in conservation. So what's one piece of advice you would give to someone who's looking to start their career in conservation?
I think the most obvious thing is just get outside as much as you can. If you can, volunteer. If you can, join like a local natural history society or a local bird group or whatever you're interested in. But even if you can't do that, just get outside and look and learn, you know, go out with a field guide. There's tons of stuff online nowadays for a lot of this stuff as well. I think in conservation, there's a lot of things that can be learned on the job, but in terms of actual species ID, you have to put a lot of your own time into it to get anywhere decent. You just need, the more time you spend out and about, the better, really.
And what's one thing that you're working on right now?
Well, just finished sort of field work for the year. So there's a huge amount of paperwork and data and maps sitting ready to be written up. So a lot of report writing and working with a very talented colleague on data storage and GIS. And she's incredibly good at that stuff. So helping me out with sort of good data management for long-term storage, good ways to share data with reserve managers and other colleagues, things like that.
And at the time of this recording, we are just into autumn now. But have you got a favourite time of year to be doing your job?
I think for my job, spring and summer, because I'm out and about more, I really like the very beginning of spring, just as winter's ending and the sort of first leaves are bursting or the first spring plants start to peek through, hearing the first sort of birds singing and noticing as it turns into spring, you know, new migrant species arriving. I really love that, and it never gets boring.
And you mentioned again that you're out on reserves quite a lot. How much of your time is spent out and about?
I think we're still figuring that out to an extent, but in the summer, sort of between March and August, I can be out a lot, as much as I can, really. Some weeks I'm out Monday to Friday, some weeks I'm out for a couple of days, but then in the winter it's much more of a desk-based job.
And what's one of the biggest challenges you would say that you face in your role?
I think being able to identify all plants is a bit of a challenge because, yes, I'm an ecologist, but I'm working on all kinds of habitats, and it might be that you're on a grassland that's been grazed really short by livestock, or you might be in a habitat that you've got less familiarity with, and just sort of trying to hold that much information or have the correct field guide with you to look something up. On a sort of broader scale, I guess just the scope of the work, that no one can be an expert on everything. In a dream world, you know, with amazing funding, we'd have a peatland ecologist and a woodland ecologist, a grassland ecologist, and a freshwater specialist, because there's always a lot more to learn.
And what is one thing that you always have with you when you are out on reserves?
The obvious thing I always have with me is binoculars, a hand lens for looking at plants, especially sort of mosses, and then snacks. But I haven't got any with me today. But that's like, always have snacks. You're always going to be out longer than you think.
The key things: binoculars, hand lens, and snacks.
I think so.
Good answer. And then the last question for you here is, have you got a favourite Scottish species?
I think I've been obsessed with otters all my life, probably since I was like 5 years old. So I'd probably say otter, and also love reptiles. And Scotland's not an obvious country for reptiles, but we've got adders, slowworms, common lizards. And it's always exciting to see any of those. Don't see them very much, but it's very cool when I do. So I
don't think anyone said a reptile yet, so that's a good answer.
Slowworms are amazing. I love them.
John, that's been brilliant. Thanks very much for chatting.
Thanks.
That was John. Thank you very much. I also had the pleasure of going out, so wasn't recording, but got to kind of, I guess, trail Ed and John as we were walking. And it was just such a beautiful kind of autumnal day. There was birds out, there was loads of fungi. I kept getting distracted from what they were saying because I was too busy looking at the fungi, but it was great. Fantastic to hear more about John, what he does with his role, and, you know, all the kind of habitat condition assessments that he's taken on. And, you know, he knows what he's talking about when he mentions that he has snacks, I think, because they are the key thing to have, especially if you're out all day. And also John mentioned hand lenses, and that's actually something I tried for the first time last month. And it's incredible. I don't know if you've used a hand lens, Ed, but it was like, it's not to be cringe, but seeing it through a whole other lens, like you could see like, it was like a whole other world to see things so up close. But a top tip for me, if you are going to use a hand lens, don't look at your hands, because we'd been out all day, and yeah, it's quite scary to see how dirty your hands up are close. But yeah, hand lens was an incredible thing for me to try, for sure. Yeah,
I mean, I've not used one too much, but I think they're a fantastic way of, you know, getting good at identification and plant species and all that kind of stuff. But they're also a really fun tool to connect with nature. Taking a closer look at stuff, you stop and you look and you kind of just see that little bit more. The same as kind of binoculars in a way. It just brings you that little bit closer. So I think, yeah, fantastic tool. And they take up no space in the bag, so it's always fun to have one in your pocket. So yeah, great bit of kit. So what are we talking about in the next episode, Rachel?
So the next episode, as they all are, is going to be great. We're going to be talking about sort of taking action for nature. So we're going to be talking about things that you can do at home, from citizen science to wildlife gardening. And we also are going to have an exciting special guest to finish this series as well.
Exciting stuff. I'm really looking forward to this. Really, really genuinely excited for this episode. Be a brilliant way to wrap up the series. I can't believe we finished a whole series already.
I know, the time flies.
When you're having fun, hopefully.
Yeah, sure.
As always, thank you very much for listening to Words of the Wild. If you'd like to get in touch, do drop us an email. You can reach us via email at communications@scottishwildlifetrust.org.uk. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got any comments or questions, please do just drop us a line. But thank you very much for listening to another episode of Words of the Wild. We hope that you've enjoyed listening to our podcast today. If you'd like to receive more regular updates on our work, including a subscription to our magazine, free access to our visitor centres and invitations to exclusive events, please consider joining the Scottish Wildlife Trust as a member. You can find out how by visiting scottishwildlifetrust.org.uk/join.